Exercise Set 1.1 Distinguishing Premises from Conclusions. The objective of this exercise set is to give you practice distinguishing premises from conclusions in other people's arguments. The instructions. First, we're going to go through the sample exercise and all of the odd-numbered exercises from Exercise Set 1.1. After I present each example, pause the video and in your book, underline the conclusion of each argument and put brackets around each premise. After each example, I'll give an explanation. For your graded assignment, you'll complete all of the even-numbered exercises from Exercise Set 1.1. Let's begin with the sample. In order to prosper, a democracy needs its citizens to be able to carry out their responsibilities completely. Being a competent citizen requires familiarity with the basics of math, natural science, social science, history, and literature, as well as the ability to read and write well, and the ability to think critically. A liberal education is essential to developing these skills. Therefore, in order for a democracy to prosper, its citizens must get a liberal education. So, pause the video and put brackets around the premises and underline the conclusion. We see that in the sample problem, the last sentence is the conclusion, and each of the first three sentences is a separate premise. However, remember that many passages contain sentences, or parts of sentences, that are neither premise nor conclusion. In this exercise, you don't need to bracket or underline those parts of the sentence. 1. Racial segregation reduces some persons to the status of things. Hence, segregation is morally wrong. So pause the video and put brackets around the premises and underline the conclusion. Okay, so the main clue in this argument is the word hence, which is a conclusion indicator. Since hence introduces the clause segregation is morally wrong, that clause is likely to be the conclusion. Furthermore, it makes more sense to see racial segregation reduces some persons to the status of things as a reason for thinking that segregation is morally wrong, rather than the other way around. Note that the word hence is not underlined in the response. Conclusion indicators point you to the conclusion, but they are not part of the conclusion itself. 3. Most people experience no side effects from the yellow fever vaccine. People with egg allergies shouldn't get the yellow fever vaccine, though, because some parts of the vaccine grow inside eggs. So pause the video and put brackets around the premises and underline the conclusion. Oh, here's the answers. In this argument, the premise and conclusion are part of a single sentence. The premise indicator, because, is your clue that the last clause is the premise and the first clause is your conclusion. Because is a special indicator word in this respect. It usually comes in between the conclusion and a premise. Thus, it helps you identify both the conclusion and a premise. Note that the first sentence is just background information. It's neither a premise nor a conclusion, so you don't need to bracket it or underline it. 5. Positron emission tomography, better known as PET, is a method for examining a person's brain. Before undergoing PET, the patient inhales a gas containing radioactive molecules. The molecules are not dangerous for the patient because they break down within a few minutes before they can do any damage. So pause the video and put brackets around the premises and underline the conclusion. The argument in this passage comes in the last sentence. Once again, the conclusion and premises are joined together with because. And again, the first two sentences are just giving you background information. They tell you what positron emission tomography is and what kind of molecules the argument is about. 7. Some people buy college degrees on the internet because they're trying to pretend that they went to college. That's a waste of money, since it's easy to make a college degree on your computer, and a degree you make yourself is just as good as a degree that you bought on the internet. Alright, pause the video and put brackets around the premises and underline the conclusion. The only genuine indicator word in this argument is the premise indicator sense. That's your clue that you're about to see a premise. If you're still having trouble identifying the conclusion after you've found those premises, ask yourself which of the remaining sentences the premises would be good reasons for. In this case, it makes sense to take the premises as reasons to think that buying college degrees online is a waste of money. It doesn't make sense to take the premises as reasons to think that people do buy college degrees online. Thus, we can mark that a waste of money as the conclusion of the argument. Notice that we've marked the last two clauses as separate premises. You could have also marked everything after sense as one long premise, but in general, it's better to treat each independent clause as its own premise. The first sentence is background information. It's neither a premise nor the conclusion of the argument. So why does it have a because in it? Remember that not every instance of because, since, or other common premise indicators is actually an indicator word. In this case, because connects a piece of the background information to an explanation of that information. An explanation differs from an argument in that an argument gives you a reason to think that something is true, whereas an explanation merely helps you understand why or how something is true. 9. In the film Interstellar, the main characters travel through a wormhole, which is a tunnel through space-time that would enable space travelers to zip from one part of the universe to another. In theory, wormholes are possible, but it's probably impossible to use wormholes to travel around the universe. Keeping wormholes open long enough to travel through them would require enormous amounts of negative energy, and it's probably impossible to generate that much negative energy. Okay, pause the video and put brackets around the premises and underline the conclusion. Many people who are new to analyzing arguments have trouble with arguments like this one. For starters, there aren't any indicator words. In order to identify the conclusion and the premises, you have to ask yourself what the author's main point is. One way to do this is to ask yourself which clauses or sentences provide a reason to believe which other independent clauses or sentences. In this case, it makes the most sense to interpret the author as using the last sentence to give us reasons to think that it's probably impossible to use wormholes to travel around the universe. A further question is whether to mark the last sentence as a single premise or as two separate premises joined by and. In most cases, this won't matter too much, but a safe rule of thumb is to divide things into two separate premises when they make two separate claims. The last sentence here makes two separate claims, one about what's required to keep a wormhole open, and one about whether it's possible to meet that requirement. That's why we've marked them as two separate premises.